everybody coming out for our first Data for Good meetup in 2022. We're pretty excited to kick this off with our presenters tonight. Real timely conversation for our city and some of the things we have going on here in Saskatchewan. So we'll get through a little bit of introductions first in terms of introducing Data for Good as an organization, and then we'll jump right into open data. So I know some of you are here for the first time and some of you have been here before. So I'm going to just quickly run through what Data for Good is and what we do here in Saskatchewan, and we'll have some of our other leads jump in as well. So the purpose of Data for Good is to build data literacy in socially focused organizations. So organizations that are doing good for people or for the environment. And so that's what we try to do here in Regina and Saskatoon. The second purpose of Data for Good is to contribute positively to the data community here in Saskatchewan, and we do that in a few different ways. The Data for Good Regina chapter is run by four co-leads. So myself, Scott Wells, who's on the call, Marina, who is also on the call. I believe I saw her jump on here, and then Josh West. And so Data for Good isn't really owned by anybody. It's really a community organization where the community drives our activities, but you gotta have somebody to kind of open a meetup and help run projects and things like that. And so that's really what our job is to facilitate Data for Good within the community. We also have a few other leads that really help make this thing run smoothly. And so one, we have Cody Rogers. And so our speakers would be familiar with Cody. He helps organize these meetups. He communicates with our speakers and make sure that their riders are set and such. We have Arnav, who runs our Data Viz challenges, just stepped up, is going to run our Data Viz challenges this year. And then we have Heidi, who's new, and she just came on board at the end of last year to be our communication lead and got our first email newsletter out to our community this year. So, really appreciate the dedication and the hard work and the smartness that the volunteers bring. Here's how Data for Good works here is that we have the chapter leads, and then we have that kind of are involved in a lot of everything. There's no real hierarchy. It's just kind of how things are broken out. Then we have our community and Data Viz lead and then we have our comms lead. Everybody's a volunteer, and we're a volunteer-based organization, and we have four ways that we engage the community. We run meetups, so once a month. So this would be considered a meetup. We used to do them live. But obviously, due to current conditions, that's not possible, but we still do run them the last Tuesday of every month. We do what are called light projects. So those are projects where we work with organizations who have, are really at the beginning of their data viz or their data journey. So maybe they're keeping all their data in an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe they are keeping all their data in a notebook. So people who are really at the beginning of the data viz journey, just data journey. And then we have major projects where we work with larger organizations that have a little bit more of a robust data infrastructure. And so they may already be collecting data and storing it. They may already be analyzing it and data vizing it, and they may already be taking actionable items. And then the last thing we do is what's called Data Viz challenges. And those are where the community comes together and works on data sets, which we'll get into in a second. Right now, actually. So Data Viz challenges are usually 60 to 90 days. They're run in the top right-hand corner by Arnav and actually Scott Wells. And basically, we get a data set, and we have 60 to 90 days where teams get together or individuals get together and contribute and visualize the data. They come together at the end of that 60 or 90 days and actually have a competition and share their data visualizations with all the Data for Good members. And so it's really tons of fun. We have lots of people who just want to start getting their data viz skills, or they're just in the process of starting out in the data world and want to practice their data viz skills and presentations. Then we have people who are really seasoned participate in the challenges. So we get all people of all types of skill sets working in these. Our next Data Viz challenge will be coming out in the first quarter of this year. So we'll probably not launch it sometime in the next 60 days. Then we have these meetups, and we have a whole bunch of people that come and present on our meetups. So we have nonprofits like 211 come and talk about their data challenges. We have the Rough Riders come in and talk about how they use data to make better football decisions and all sorts. So, really the purpose of these meetups is to bring all of us together to talk about data and to help us move forward together. All boats rise in a tide. The last piece is projects. And so last year we worked on a bunch of cool projects for a bunch of cool organizations. Sophia House, Regina Food Bank, United Way, 211. And these were organizations, some of them had their own data systems already, and we helped them. Scott and Josh and Marina did things like dashboarding and geospatial work. And we had about 25 people working on various projects with the food bank. Josh helped with their web analytics. And so yeah, we had a busy year last year in Saskatchewan. Which brings us to work we have coming up already this year. Mr. Wells?
Good evening, folks. So one of the exciting projects that we actually have coming up right away, we've got a couple of groups within Saskatchewan that are wanting to take a look at cost of living and across the province. Obviously, with things that are going on with COVID and otherwise, there's groups that have been hit a little bit harder than others. And other than Stats Canada data that's done at a point in time every so often, there really isn't great information related to cost of living across the province. And so the hope is that we can maybe find some creative solutions to how would we start to approximate that across the province. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the things that make up cost of living, and this is just kind of one calculation of it. But essentially what we're going to be looking to do is throw this out to the community and see if we can get a couple of folks. The skill sets that we're likely looking for here, more on the data engineering side of things, maybe someone with web scraping ability and otherwise, but the email will be going out fairly shortly to ask for folks that might be interested in doing something here. And then there's a number of groups that are kind of interested in this work. And so this work will probably be ongoing for, now until probably the summer. But again, more to come on that, and make sure that you've signed up either through Meetup or through our website to be a volunteer. We're going to reach out to the community with that information as we get it.
Right on. So we've got an awesome speaker, a couple of speakers tonight, and they have killer presenting software, open source software. So if you are not familiar with, you're going to want to put your Zoom settings in speaker mode, and so you can see Keith's full screen and all the cool way he presents with the software that he has. So if you're not on speaker view, then make sure you're on speaker view. Cody looks like he's either singing, sneezing, or praising. I'm not sure which one there.
Great.
All right. Before I intro our speakers, if you want to get connected with Data for Good, obviously you're probably on our Meetup page. So thanks for that. That's one way to stay connected. Two is if you go to regina.dataforgood.ca, you can sign up for numerous things. One, if you have a project you want us to look at, there's a project intake form there. Two, if you want to volunteer, there's a volunteer form. Or three, if you just want to hang out and be involved in our communications, you can sign up. There's a general email sign up form there. We're on Twitter. If there's any slides from any of our previous presentations that we're allowed to share, you can see them on slideshare.net. We're on Instagram. And we also have a Slack channel. If you want to be a part of that, just shoot me an email at kevin.hayes@dataforgood.ca, and I'll make sure that you get an invite to that. And also recently we've been posting our meetups on YouTube as well. So any recording that we're allowed to share, then we will put up on our YouTube page. All right. Any questions before we get into tonight's presentation? All right. Cool. I'm not going to intro these folks too much, but I really loved what they had on their, one of the quotes they had on their website: to achieve the goals of sustainable development, critical data must be open and available for reuse by anyone, anywhere, anytime, by Sir Tim Berners-Lee. And so that's just setting the tone of what we're going to talk about tonight. So without further ado, Keith and Yuri.
Okay, hi. Welcome, folks. Nice to be talking to Saskatchewan tonight. Good to see you, and welcome. We're going to show a video, actually, that you're speaking of your YouTube channel. This is something that we posted on our GoodTube channel, which you can see over my shoulder. And the address for it I've put in the chat, so you can find that address there. We're actually trying to increase our viewership there and subscribers and likes and so on, because as you probably know, the more you have, the more you can leverage through YouTube, including getting a nice custom address. But it takes a lot of subscribers. So we've got basically everything we do in our organization that can be recorded. We post up here. So by all means, you can post what we're doing tonight, and we'll definitely share and give it a like and so on. So this is just one of the properties that we have going, but we wanted to have a kick at the can doing something on open data. So we called it Open Data 101. And we actually, we're working with another organization, which perhaps you know of, the Canadian Open Data Society. And we're a regional group, and they're, of course, more national, but we do like to communicate back and forth and try not to duplicate too much content. So ours is quite unique in terms of our webinars and our Good Cafe and a number of other projects that we work on. And again, as I say, we like to post those, including our conference. So what we'll do is start off with this video, and we'll roll that, and then we'd like to come back and have a dialogue right away about anything that catches your attention or comes to mind in terms of the content we're presenting there. We certainly like to discuss some of the background, where we got our information, that kind of thing. So if we're good to go, let me just hit the on button, and we'll go to full screen on that. There are official definitions of open data, which we'll get into later, but we thought it would be more practical to start with some context, which we find in this video from the county of Grande Prairie, Alberta.
The county of Grande Prairie has joined governments across the world who are opening their files and unlocking their hard drives, unleashing the potential of open data. This open information is changing the way people work, make day-to-day decisions, and solve problems. Open data takes information that the government has been collecting for its own use for years and makes it available for anyone to use. The data is uploaded to an online data catalog and is free and accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As always, sensitive information or information subject to confidentiality and privacy legislation will remain private and secure. Most of us think of data as just numbers, statistics, and spreadsheets. But data is our day-to-day experiences, what goes on around us in our homes, on our farms, in our communities, and across the world. We can take that information and use it as it is. Slice it and dice it into a format we find useful, or even combine publicly available data with private data and create something completely new and useful. Open data makes our governments more transparent and accountable. But just as important, it makes it easier for citizens to communicate with government and with each other. That leads to collaboration and cooperation. People become more informed and engaged. Businesses can save time and make smarter decisions. Around the world, open data is being used in a number of creative ways, simplifying tasks people do every day. Here's some examples being used. A smartphone application to find the nearest walk-in clinic, pharmacy, or emergency department. In just one tap, you can view the location, the hours, and even the services the clinic offers. You can even access a one-stop source of highway construction information, which is used to help commuters find alternate routes around construction zones. And these are only a few of the endless possibilities for open data. Open data is a powerful, innovative concept that allows easy access of information to citizens in order to build better workforces, better communities, and a better society. Open data, making the County of Grand Prairie and you partners in growth and innovation.
Now let's dive into some basics about data and open data. This pyramid illustrates the relationships among data, information, and knowledge. From the bottom to the top, you can see that data is basically facts and figures which relay something specific, but they're not organized in any way. Moving up to information, that's contextualized, categorized, calculated, and condensed data, which leads to knowledge, the know-how, understanding, experience, insight, intuition, and contextualized information. You might say data is like atoms of information. Information is what you get from data by applying process to it, and knowledge is the understanding or insight you get from information by drawing a conclusion from it. Digital data versus information for the public. There is a distinction between data for computers and for people. Data in a digital form works for computer programs, but not for people. We can't read code easily. There are two kinds of data, quantitative and qualitative. You can use numbers to describe quantitative, things like counts, measurements, coordinates. Qualitative, you can't count it, but you can observe and record it, colors, shapes, textures, jurisdictions, etc. Now examples, counting how many votes, that's quantitative, but votes for a party or in a poll area, that's qualitative. In addition to types of data, we need to understand that there is a data spectrum, as defined by the UK's Open Data Institute, or ODI. Now that runs from being closed data to shared data to open data. The spectrum also notes that data can differ in size, small, medium to big data, and also classes of data, personal, commercial, and government data. Closed data is typically related to internal confidential data, some of which may be shared, for example, sales reports, but only with internal access. There is some overlap into shared data via named access, such as providing access to a Google spreadsheet. Shared data has a number of variations which overlaps into both closed, as I just mentioned, and open data. The sharing can happen via group-based access to data, for example, medical research data, some sharing for COVID-19. Sharing can also happen via public access to data and information, such as a Twitter feed that links to a file. But open data, that's the ultimate, most desired endgame for the data spectrum. Open data defined. So, what is open data? The often referenced definition is provided by the Open Knowledge Foundation. Open data and content can be freely used, modified, and shared by anyone for any purpose. This is the succinct definition, but let's expand a bit here. Open data is also viewed as being timely and comprehensive digital data that can be freely accessed, used, reused, shared, mixed, and built on by anyone, anywhere, anytime, for any purpose. Open data is free, both in the technical sense, for example, not limited to one type of software that can read it, and the legal sense, not costing anything, and you're told you can mash it up with other data. You can republish it, interpret it in any way for commercial, political, or other purposes. Now, what is the framework for open data? Let's take a look at the core principles of open data. The principles for open data have gone through an evolution over the years and now landed on 6 principles that were developed via the community and the International Open Data Charter, who are the curators for the principles as well as leading open data-related initiatives. Here's our attempt at describing the principles in layperson's terms. Open by default. As the name implies, it states that all government data should be available and open to access. There are exceptions to this rule, such as personal information and security data. The open by default principle is often the cornerstone of open data, open government policy. Timely and comprehensive. This principle speaks to the value proposition for the effective use of open data. In most cases, if the data is not current or the data set coverage not complete, the ability to use the data may be greatly diminished. Accessible and usable. For open data, accessibility is an imperative. This means the data must be easily found. For example, in an open data portal, versus being scattered across several web pages. And it needs to be easily accessed. To be usable, open data needs to be digital and machine readable in common formats, for example, CSV files, not a PDF. In addition, the data must have open data licensing that allows it to be used without restrictions. Comparable and interoperable. The principle speaks to the need to compare data and to have the ability of systems and software to exchange data. To be most effective and useful, data should be easy to compare within and between sectors, across geographic locations, and over time. To be able to exchange and or combine data, there's a need to have data standards in place. Challenges include trying to combine data sets with differing formats, such as the date. One set has year, month, day. The other set has day, month, year. For improved governance and citizen engagement, open data has the capacity to let citizens and others in government have a better idea of what officials and politicians are doing. This transparency can improve public services and help hold governments to account. Open data provides opportunities for enhanced and meaningful citizen engagement, for example, hackathons, which we'll discuss later. For inclusive development and innovation. Finally, open data can help spur inclusive economic development. For example, greater access to data can make farming more efficient, or it can be used to tackle climate change. We often think of open data as just about improving government performance, but there's a whole universe out there of entrepreneurs making money off the back of open data. These principles may appear to be overwhelming, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and implementing these principles cannot be done in a day either. Rather, they are implemented incrementally through changing data collection, data maintenance, and data archiving. There are also some overarching principles, such as the open government principles of transparency, accountability, and being participatory. The open data principles align with the broader open government principles. The Ontario Information and Privacy Commissioner's Office, or IPC, provides a key framework for transparency via their Access by Design document and also their important Privacy by Design principles. All levels of government typically will have someone responsible for providing access to information and managing the Freedom of Information, or FOI, process, and a different person to manage the privacy aspects of providing data. For example, must not release personally identifiable data. The personal data graphic illustrates some examples of personally identifiable data, including your name, address, health conditions, income, cultural profile. However, this type of information is available from agencies such as Statistics Canada in an aggregated form, so no individual can be identified. How to find access? Well, one of the greatest values of open data is actually discovering data and accessing it through your own organization's open data portal. Most people don't know what their organization has, and in the old days, you needed to jump through hoops and sign a data sharing agreement with the department you were getting it from. And often the data was in a format that you couldn't use. Now we have consistent data sharing licenses that most public sector organizations use, and you'll find most open data portals have a number of standard data formats, such as the CSV files I mentioned earlier. Today, it's still awkward to find thematic data, for example, environmental data, which can reside in 4 levels of government portals and associated agencies, such as conservation authorities and civil society groups. To address this, what's coming in the next few years is a federated data search, so you'll be able to search the combined open data portals across Canada and potentially international data from organizations such as the United Nations and the European Union. Open Data Access, Ontario's data authority. This is simply an FYI to keep you current on what's happening related to data access in Ontario. The Ontario Digital Service is exploring what an open data authority might look like and what it could do. The graphics here are 2 slides from their August 25, 2021 consultation webinar. The initiatives seek to increase access to high-value government data, improve data infrastructure, ensure privacy and transparency, and promote equity and accessibility. It's notable that at this stage, just starting, they state that the data authority will not share personal data, identify you, compromise the safety of your information, or collect additional information about you. This is something that we should follow to see where it goes and how it might benefit our organizations. Open data outcomes in our everyday lives. Open Day started as an initiative of civil society, promoting access to government data, thereby promoting transparency. One perceived benefit was to ease freedom of information request for routine inquiries. Here's some added examples where open data is put to work. Weather forecasting, transit data for ride scheduling apps on mobile phones. And there's more. Genealogy and cemetery data, election voting, turnout, expense, and donor data, scientific observations like counting crows, neighborhood observations like noise data, government budgets and programs. The Open Government Partnership includes 78 nations, Canada is one, and 76 subnationals, Ontario is one, as members. But now everyone can publish open data. Private businesses, Google, GitHub, Uber, and others have opened selected data sets. Nonprofits and charities, notably FundTracker by Aja, a Montreal company, uses and generates open data on corporate and charitable grants and donations. Scientists. The publication of open science data actually began in 1957 to allow the verification of scientific claims by allowing others to look at the reproducibility of results and to allow data from many sources to be integrated to give new knowledge. Famously, the human genome is open data, and there's an open data consortium for geospatial data. From a citizen's view, Barcelona comprehensively reversed the usual unconsented flow of data permissions from citizens to corporations and governments. They are leading a group of fearless cities worldwide enacting similar principles. Real-world experience. In looking at the real world of the open data ecosystem, there are a couple of areas that stand out. Collaboration and sharing among stakeholders. The Niagara Area and Municipalities and Region Open Data Portal, or the Ontario Public Sector Open Data, PSOD. This is a collaborative with municipal representatives and a good member as co-chairs. The move towards data and process standardization. Examples, the Standards Council of Canada Data Governance Standardization, or Municipal Information Systems, the Association Pilot Project on Open Data Standards. And finally, community engagement. The best example here are the many in-person and virtual hackathons happening frequently around the world. Complexities, reality checks. We felt it was important to do a reality check on open data, especially with the public sector where most open data lives. Government is often portrayed as being bureaucratic with a corporate culture that is resistant to change. This characterization can vary greatly among organizations, but getting buy-in to something new will always require a business case, illustrating the value to both the organization and the people they serve. One of the often used arguments for moving forward with open data relates to the larger principles of open government, being transparent, accountable, and being participatory, which all politicians can agree on as being important for public service. There is also a strong case for moving forward by referencing the fact that open government and open data has become the norm in many organizations, which likely includes some neighboring jurisdictions. This is also true from a thematic or departmental perspective, where making their data open has enhanced internal processes and service delivery. Certainly, Rome wasn't built in a day. And we say again, neither is open data. There is a process that typically involves developing policy, preparing data for publication, designing and creating an open data portal, undertaking community engagement, and maintaining all aspects of an open data program. This can be done incrementally, by starting small and scaling as resources allow. For those starting out, it's beneficial to tap into the open data community, to learn from those who've gone through this, and leverage their best practices. The early days of open data saw the initiative being done off the side of the desk from dedicated people who believed in the value of open data. Today, it's important to recognize that there should be a plan to resource the development and maintenance of an open data program. You may wish to use a pilot project to help build the business for a proposed program together with a resource plan that should include an open data steering coordinating committee, an open data lead, and also a department, departmental leads, and any external resources support. Bottom line, your open data initiative will be limited to your organization's capacity. Having said that, open data has the potential to create improved internal processes, which offsets the need for new resources and reallocates resources to different tasks. This can vary significantly depending on your organization's current state. It's doable, and many have gone before you. Open data community, local to global. The open government and open data community has grown significantly since its beginnings in 2008. Aspects like data sharing has been going on much earlier than that. We've noted a sampling of nonprofits from local, like the Go Open Data Association, to national, like the Canadian Open Data Society, and longtime open data advocates and researchers, such as Open North and the Governance Lab from NYU, which Good also collaborates with. At the global level, we have the International Open Data Charter, which Good is a supporting institution, and the Open Government Partnership, which began with 8 members in 2011, with President Obama as co-chair, and now has 78 members. These organizations and many related organizations provide information that assists with developing a policy framework, operational guidelines, and ongoing research. And there is open knowledge in the Open Data Institute in the UK. These are all a small sampling of a much larger community that you can tap into. In Canada, there is a collaboration at all levels of government, including the Federal Provincial Coordinating Committee. A provincial example is the previously mentioned PSOD, Public Sector Open Data Collaborative. Local collaboratives include Niagara Open Data, which includes 13 municipalities and school boards. And there is the West Parry Sound Geography Network, providing shared services of GIS and open data for 7 local communities. As open data has matured, there has been an increase in community events. With Good and CODS, there are typically monthly events, such as our Good Cafes and webinars, in addition to the annual conferences held by both organizations, Good in the spring and CODS in the fall. One notable type of community event is called a hackathon, not to be confused with the bad people that hack us. No, hackathons bring together people in the community and are open to everyone to participate in a challenge that addresses a community need. Now, you don't need to be a programmer to create an app. It could be about defining principles, creating a framework for policy, or simply researching the topic to recommend next steps. There are a wealth of opportunities to get involved and to expand your network that can assist you with your open data initiative. Open data resources. For those who are new to open data, there are many resources that you can leverage on your own and a community with groups that you can contact to help you begin your open data initiative. We've noted both Good and CODS providing some resources, while other nonprofits such as Open North, GovLab, the Open Knowledge Foundation, and the Open Data Institute have numerous resources and initiatives underway, together with government resources, such as the Federal Do-It-Yourself Toolkit, the Ontario Government Open Government website, and a variety of resources from the local level, such as Toronto's Open Data Master Plan and other municipal plans. Open data, is it for you? After all we've talked about in the prior slides, you may be asking yourself whether open data is for you. So here's a few scenarios that might help you decide on the relevance of an open data program. Repetitive data requests. We know that many different types of data are constantly requested by internal and external clients. Requests such as zoning bylaw boundaries, building permit status, COVID-19 statistics, flood plan boundaries, budget data. It's been found that in these types of circumstances, there are efficiencies in creating a process that makes the data available as open data that both internal and external users can access via standard open data license. Data for operational needs. It's been discovered that sometimes different departments will go to external resources to acquire data for their operational and project needs, often at considerable cost, while not realizing that the same data is available within their organization. Many organizations don't have a comprehensive inventory of the data that exists. Lots of data is in silos, and there is little data knowledge sharing. Often you hear, "I don't know, someone else could use our data." Open data addresses this scenario. Value proposition for data collection. Every organization is structured by operational functions, for example, finance, IT, planning, engineering. Over time, these departments or divisions have developed processes for their mandate and collected the data that supports planning and day-to-day operations. The cost of data collection and maintenance is substantial. It's been shown that making your data available as open data also fosters innovation, with entrepreneurs creating apps or services that were never previously considered for that data. This creates an economic development opportunity. So, is open data for you? At minimum, you owe it to yourself to research the potential benefits of open data to your organization and to your citizens and stakeholders. You may already have open data operating in your organization or have a policy mandate to undertake open data. So reach out to those who have been down this road and create a plan that suits your organization with appreciation of the capacity to undertake this program. This presentation was visualized and written by Jury Konga. I'm Keith McDonald, producer and narrator. For more information, go to goopendata.ca. All right, so that is our Open Data 101, and gives you some idea of what we're talking about to people in Ontario. And surprisingly, there's still a lot of people who don't know that much about open data. So we really felt it might be a good starting place for us to produce something that we could use in sessions like this. And at some point, we'll probably do a live version of this. As you can probably tell from the narration, it'd be pretty hard to do live just like that. So this is one strategy that we're using, but we also in our conferences and so on do lots of live stuff too. So wanted to indicate that there's some variables in what we're doing. So Yuri, if you want to get yourself ready to talk as well, we'll take some questions if you have them, or we can give you a bit more detail about Go Open Data. And Kevin, I assume through chat is where the questions come through. Is that how you normally?
Yeah, so a couple of ways. One is you can anybody can put their questions through chat. That's cool, or just raise your hand. And we're also a small enough group, so if you want to ask a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask.
Sounds good. We could just, while we're waiting to see, just tell you a little bit about Go Open Data. We actually incorporated just about a year ago into a nonprofit association, much like yourself. And we've been around for a little bit longer than that, but we were hearing from people that they wanted a bit more structure to us. So we finally formalized things, launched our website, launched into webinars and providing content like that. But it's kind of like the little engine that could, in a sense, because, and Yuri can talk more about this, but because he was involved in the beginning, it was actually designed to be a one-off. But so many people enjoyed the first presentation, which I believe was in Waterloo and I forget the year, was it 2014 Yuri, something like that?
2013.
2013, pretty close. And so it began as a regular thing, that is, as a conference event going from 2 days to 3 days. Last year we did our first virtual event because of COVID again, and this year will also be a virtual event. But we've been kicking around for a while and planning to do lots of interesting things. So I can see some hands coming up already. So perhaps we'll start with, is it Khurshid? I see you're not mute, but I don't hear anything.
Oh, he's off mute. We can't hear you though, Khurshid.
Okay, maybe we'll go to Scott and then we can see if we can get Khurshid back.
Yeah.
Hello, Scott.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. That was fantastic. The question that I've gotten, maybe it's kind of a two-part question, is Ontario is clearly a lot further along than Saskatchewan as it relates to open data. Why do you think that is? What's kind of driven that, or why is it a little bit more successful?
I think that's an interesting question, and Yuri will probably want to add to this too. But in the early days, Toronto, along with Montreal, Edmonton, Vancouver, sort of dove in quite quickly, and so maybe an early start helped. There was a lot of liaison between those cities as well. In fact, there was something created called the G4, and I think it expanded to the G4 Plus when Montreal joined. And so there was a lot of dialogue and interaction about things like licensing and a protocol and the portals and all of that kind of stuff. So that goes back actually to around 2011, I think. And in Toronto's case in particular, I used to be with Toronto as the open data lead. It was Mayor David Miller, who was a really huge believer in open data. And he didn't go through council. He essentially made it a mayor's command, if you like, which even the legality of that, by the way, was discussed by a lot of people involved in the initiative. But anyway, he wanted it done, and he set a deadline of November, fall, I believe. And so we did make that, and it was very lean. I mean, we got some data up, and it was certainly resolving a lot of the issues as to the privacy reviews of it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think getting through a lot of that stuff early helped the initiative along. And it's like practice makes perfect. So hackathons, all of these things started to appear all over the place. And the city was engaged, quite engaged. It was one of my mandates to be as engaged as possible with the community and so on. And it was a fairly good relationship that we established there. So I think all of that really helped build a lot of momentum, but it did stall. So the way you put your question, it's true and it's not true. At the same time, there's many cities like Guelph, in Ontario, who is in some cases far exceeded the bar with a lot of their initiatives and using open data to work with procurement, all kinds of fairly complicated stuff. You may have even heard that, the low-hanging fruit, we used to hear that all the time. That's where people start with their data, right? So there's still a lot of groups that are stalled at that. It's the easy stuff that they've got up and the more complex stuff they haven't done yet. So yeah, it's like everything else. There's some really good about it and some not so good. So I found in any of the dialogue I've had, and that includes people from England and China even around open data, I always tend to think when I hear them talk that, their initiative is better than the ones I've been involved with. And they will always respond by saying, oh, no, I thought your initiative was way better than us. So, it depends on your thinking and your thought process as to what you're trying to achieve and if you get there yet. I think it's a really long road. And the best things that could happen, we mentioned the federated site in the video, is getting to that point, right? Where it's one place you go to get your data and everybody's data goes up there and it's standardized in its formats. And it is the weeds data. And that's the really tough nut to crack. And I think some of what Open Data wants to do is resolve some of those issues. So we've done a lot of work talking to groups about standards and bringing people together to discuss standards. And I always say that everybody's supportive of standards as long as they're the ones that you use. So if they're my standards, it's all good. But if I have to change the way I do it, it's not so easy to change. So yeah, there's a lot of complexity in it. And if you have the impression that, let's say, Ontario is ahead, that's interesting. And there may be some reasons for that. But as I say, Calgary, I'm not too familiar with what's going on in Saskatoon or Saskatchewan, I should say. Specifically, but there's a fellow that we know named Richard Pietro who did a open government tour some years ago, and he literally drove his motorbike across Canada, and he talked about open data at group get-togethers and so on, and I'm pretty sure he did something in Saskatchewan. So I think you must be on your way. You can actually tell us what you're doing, and one of the things we want is to make these kind of connections, by the way, with folks, and the more involvement and symmetry that we can achieve, the better. So if we know what you're doing and you know what we're doing, that's great. And if we can both celebrate each other, fantastic.
And sorry, I'll be quick on my second part of the question there. And it's maybe just to follow up to say, there's a lot of excitement around that in Saskatchewan right now. A number of organizations are looking to do that. And so it's probably reaching out and having some conversations about what's the best way to kind of kick off some of that. So again, just thank you for the presentation. It was awesome.
Fantastic, Scott. Thanks. Now, should we try Cursit again? If you got, I see a mic showing up, but it's muted.
Okay, let's try again.
Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for taking the question, Keith. So I was interested in open source, development and then open source data also, transferring that concept over there. And got interested in commons and how the commons concept came around. Like there'll be a meadow where everybody can take the sheep and they can, but it was looked after by everybody because it was like common interest. So has that been transferred and what's the relationship to the data and how's that in relation to open data concept? Because there has to be some maintenance, ongoing maintenance of the data to make sure that, it's still valid.
Yeah, now are you speaking specifically about government portals?
No, like anybody. So if organizations are, they say, okay, this is a common data lake, let's say, or a warehouse, data warehouse, and we are going to supply this slice of information or data, and they still have the kind of ownership as far as quality is concerned, but it's for the good of everybody. Everybody can dip in and drink from there.
Yeah, I think it's really extremely variable. Like I mentioned government because I'm most familiar with that, but some of the groups that are starting to put things up, we all have the same issues, as in privacy assessments, what goes, what doesn't go. And you're quite right. Maintenance is huge. And a lot of the initial open data beginnings were what we called off the desk kind of activities. You know, you had another job and they gave you the task of doing open data as well. And it was literally off the desk. And we're seeing more cohesiveness where, and we mentioned this in the video about, you know, choosing an open data lead, having a department that it's housed in, and committees that involve all your data suppliers to you. So private can work the same way. They tend to be a little more particular about what they release. And often they're not going to release anything that would be demonstrating stuff that their competition could use. But I think the key issues there are your process. So it's true of private, it's true of government. You have to decide, what is your process? What is the cycle? How long are you going to leave the data up there? Big question, right? Because if someone is using that data to create something with it, and suddenly that data disappears, that's something that they created is no longer viable. So I know the government had a lot of issues around that. What is the lifespan? And we used to argue that it should be forever. So what you're doing is growing the pot constantly, right? More and more and more and more and more data. And that can become a lot. If it's a very minimal team, and in some cases it could just be one person, that's really another aspect that's hard because it involves a lot of time to do that. So then when do you have time to recruit data? I think private may be more into the idea of assigning a job and a title and making that work. I think the common is that, how does it make money for you? It's another question you have to ask, because it costs money. We can say, as we did in the video, that it can save money avoiding duplications, and that's quite true. But it's hard to convince sometimes the powers that be that might create jobs for it and that kind of thing. And it's surprising how much both private and government have in common. So I think, hopefully, in answer to your question, really, it's best done with a team with a lot at position. So someone's handling maintenance, someone's handling like propaganda, if you like, why we should get your data. There's other issues like cleansing the data, making sure it's in machine readable formats. All of that is true no matter whether you're a private enterprise or a government or a nonprofit. If you're going to release your data, you have to follow the same principles, which we mentioned in the video as well from the Open Data Charter, which is interesting because it's a lot of meat in those 6 principles, right? And it really is true. You can't do them all at once. You have to build up to finally achieving what we call the nirvana of open data. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did kind of. But I would be still interested in exploring this further, because just like open source, before Oracle took over Java, and it was all done by not job titles, but they took pride in the work they did. And most of the open source code, except for log for something called which had problem, but not intentional, right? So it's always the best intended stuff which is coming out from those dedicated folks who are just there for the technical challenge of it.
Yeah,
So
that's very true still. Yeah, in fact, the movement itself really started with people that were, I guess I could say, into open data and saw some value in it. And they've been the early adopters, the ones that were pushing it and took pride, as you say, in the data. That was one of our selling points that we tried in the city when I was there, to say, this is what you do. You collect this data. This is, when you go home and your kids say, what do you do? Well, I collect data and I look at it and I analyze it. So if you send it to the portal, you can actually point to it. In fact, here's my work showing up in the portal. We tried to make that spin that as a good thing, which it is. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you'd say that. Yeah, I think we owe a lot of gratitude to those who were willing to do the work, in some cases not even getting paid to do the work, and took pride in setting it up. And there was a fellow I knew back about 4 years ago. I think he worked out at Seneca College, and his brother-in-law, it was in BC. He was talk about a one-person operation. He set up the website, he provided the data, and he was the Open Data Initiative. It was a smaller town in BC. Perfect example, I think, of what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
We have a question in the chat from Marina. So before we get to that, were you going to say something, Keith? Before I
Oh no, I
really
was
just
just going to
cut you
go
off?
to, it's not Rochelle, is it Cody? Because he's had his hand up for a bit, but do you want to go to the chat? Let's do that and then we'll come back to.
Yeah, let's. We're gonna ask a question: is there a catalog of open data sources or a list of open data websites?
Yeah, that's something that we're cognizant of and we want to do. So there is and there isn't. Some city portals will talk about other websites. There really isn't one place that you can go to find everything, which is still an issue. I think from a Canadian standpoint, it would be good if there was. So Erie, would you say, our hub is something that's the beginning of that, or how would you want to?
Well, number one, there is no one place where you can find all of the open data that exists either at the global or local level. The idea of a federated open data site that pulls in all of the data from all the open data sites, say through Canada, has been an idea that's like 10 years old, and the federal government is just getting around to it now. It's a really, really slow process. But one of the, to what Keith just alluded to, there is a project that we have that actually we'd love to have you folks collaborate with us. It's called our Open Hub. And the idea is to get everything related to open, whether it's open data or open government or various sectors or themes, have it all in one place. But that requires, some programming that pulls in data and information from, basically crawling the web and also having some AI when we get information coming in to decide, the attributes, where we should categorize it and what places in the website it should show up. So there's an awful lot of work involved there, and we've had a limited success. We have an alpha site that I'll put up on the chat that you can look at, but that was just for getting feedback. So now we want to develop a beta site. And I also wanted to say that project that you're looking at around the cost of living, on our annual conference coming up April 21 to 23, we have a panel that speaks to, what it takes for healthy humans. So we're talking about, things like mental health, like, affordable housing and, food insecurity, things like that, which really align with what you folks are looking at from the point of view of the cost, because the cost that I saw is beyond a lot of people in the city, as well as the rural population. So I think there's some alignments, getting back to the question, the answer is no, there's no centralized, but we'd love to work with you to move towards that situation. And also, have a look at the possibility of collaborating on one or more of our projects.
Yeah, that's cool. That sounds awesome and something that we would be open for further discussion on.
Yeah,
There
I
is
was
a-
gonna say thank you, Erin, Keith, and I thought I was asking a very naive question, but I really I really feel like I hit the spot, and I think in our volunteer base there is gonna be some individuals who are definitely gonna be interested in something like scraping and cataloging, and we can do like Saskatchewan open data, Ontario open data. I think it would be something really sweet to discuss further.
There is a Canadian company called Think Data Works that started scraping. You should mention scraping for sure. And it's got levels where you can get some stuff for free and then you can buy in and get more, and great analytics processes and stuff that they have. and it made an attempt to try to bring things together. But again, it wasn't complete. But it is an interesting source. The fact that they were pulling from sites like the Toronto site before Toronto really was ready to have all that kind of stuff happen. They just went ahead and did it. And we were thinking, great, fantastic. Because again, I think in open data, more cooks are better, right? Rather than too many cooks is a bad thing. Too many cooks is a good thing when it comes to open data. So we should get to Cody, I think. Been waiting.
Yeah, my question is just for it's like focused on like smaller governments. So like I'm in a more rural area, like I said before. The town that I live close to is about 6,000 people, and I was just wondering, like, have you heard of or of like towns of that size doing an open data project, or maybe like a couple towns coming together and doing a project together, or is that like too small of a municipality to put together anything like that?
That's a great question. Yuri, do you have any insight there?
Yeah, I actually worked on a project that was a collaborative, and there were some, a couple of the municipalities, there were 7 in total. A couple had like 500 people as population. So this was really focused on a cooperative around shared GIS services. And then it expanded to include open data. And that's the project that I work with them on. But again, I think when you get down to that small size, a lot of time it needs to be like a shared service among a number of municipalities. Otherwise, the exercise is one of, here's our budget spreadsheet or something like that comes out. And I'm just gonna, when I find it, I'll put it up on the, sorry, I'm just waiting for my computer to talk to me. When I find it, I'll put it up on the chat. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the way that it needs to be approached as a cooperative thing, because there's a lot of municipalities, there's 5,000 across Canada, and a lot of them don't have the capacity or the resources. In some municipalities, the manager or the CAO, the clerk and treasurer and chief bottle washer is one person. Okay, and so when you look at like your IT department, it's we got half a person that knows something about spreadsheets, and that's our IT department, and then they outsource it to others. So you have to be really innovative, but I think the importance of collaboration and looking at setting up some cooperatives is something to be looked at. And you start it out as a pilot project. You don't go whole hog. You try it on a limited kind of scope, and then you try it out and see if it works. And what doesn't work, you say, can we fix it? Do we want to move forward?
So that would be like say my town here, and then like a few of the surrounding towns that are like, there's one that's like 4,000 people, and then like there's a few that have like 500 people and 1,000. Like if they all came together and said, how about let's do this project and call it like the Northeast Saskatchewan Northeast Open Data Collaboration or something. It's something like that. It would say that it would work best as, eh?
I'd say so, yeah. Absolutely, because there's more strength, I think, in terms of team power that way. And you could even have, I would like to approach my condo with this concept, because we're 3 buildings, and our electricity bill is actually paid by the corporation, so our fees go into the electricity, but we don't actually see a cause and effect with our electricity use. So what if they had a competition between building 1, building 2, and building 3, where they were tracking use in those buildings? And, if building 3 ended up saving more electricity, maybe we get something like free parking for a month or something like that. Same idea, I think, in the municipalities. I suppose if there's really radical differences, 500 versus 6,000, that's maybe not as fair. But I think there's many ways you could work something like that to get your community excited about it. Because I think an important thing, especially starting open data, is to make people aware of what it is and what it does and why it's valuable. A lot of people, especially in the citizenry, as we'd say, they won't get it. I remember we were adopting a cat, and we didn't adopt from this particular store, but she was used to getting strays and all this kind of stuff. And she did a full survey of us as our behaviors and everything else. And her question was, well, what's your job, right? And I said, open data lead. And she went, open data, what's that? And I lost her, I think, 3 sentences in, so it's getting those elevator conversations that you can really answer quickly. So yeah, if it's early days and you may not have transit data so that you can make a transit app out of it, but there might be things you can do around the environment, or as I say, water use or something like that, transportation issues, snowfall, a lot of interesting ways you could go. But I think, yeah, more collaborative is probably going to be the most helpful.
I think I just want to add another interesting phenomena, which is not unique to Ontario. When you get down to the municipal, local government level, there is a degree of competitiveness. So if your neighbor is doing open data, the mayor says, oh shit, what's that? Like, find out about what this open data thing is. Why aren't we doing it? We've seen that happen a number of times. And creating the awareness, I think one of the things that we haven't done a real good job of is illustrating, kind of the impact of open data and how it impacts individuals, families, communities, kind of the social good, the value of open data. We haven't done a great job of that. So the more kind of use cases we have, the better off we are. And I think I think there's another kind of disconnect, if you will, and that would be ourselves being open data geeks, open government geeks, and you folks who say, hey, give me some data. I'm gonna create something good from it to have a positive impact, socioeconomic impact. So I think, this is the third. Is this the second or third? I can't remember. But anyways, we are connecting with a number of the chapters, for data for good across the country, and so I think we're starting to kind of share knowledge and figure out, where we can work together for the common good, because our bottom line, our mission is around community well-being, period. So open data has an opportunity, and you folks have technical skills that we need to get some of our projects moving forward. And we may have some expertise to assist you in finding and leveraging data that you're interested in. So I think there's a real opportunity here.
Indeed. I was smiling, Yuri, because you remind me of the challenge. I don't believe it's the same mayor in Winnipeg. This was around 2017, just before I left the city. But their open data lead called me up, and Public Sector Digest started a ranking of cities across Canada. And the mayor in Winnipeg was upset because they weren't in the top 10. So his mission directive to the open data lead was get us to number 1. And I believe they made it. So don't underestimate the value of a councillor or even the mayor being behind it, because to be truthful, when Mayor Miller left, didn't run for mayor, we did have one of those stall points because the mayor wasn't behind it. Now, we had Rob Ford, we have Mayor John Tory. Ford, interestingly enough, I believe wouldn't have been totally against open data. He was very interested, obviously, in economics and spending and things like that, and could have been approached, I think, from that angle, but he wasn't approached In fact, when I left the city, I did a Freedom of Information ask to see what they did, and they didn't. Same with John Tory. He's much more pro open data, but nowhere near what David Miller is and was. So if you can get some allegiance on the political side, you might find things can move a bit faster. It's not always easy to do, and often as an employee, you're not really allowed to discuss with councillors, right? So it depends on the workings, I suppose, of your inner city governments. But that's where actually outside groups can play a major role in dialoguing with the politics and saying, we want this, we want this. So again, it can be a collaboration between like some inside contact and who do I talk to, and an outside group bringing it forward.
Right
I
on.
think just adding to that, Keith, I think one of the things that I have seen both when I was in municipal government and as well as consulting is that the degree of success in local government is very dependent on the leadership, both at the political level and also the senior management level, like the C level within the organization. Because if you don't have buy-in at those two levels, you're not going to go anywhere, or there will be limited success with, whether it's an IT project or whether it's an open data initiative. It doesn't matter if you don't have kind of leadership that buys in to the idea at that level. It typically doesn't go very far.
Yeah, I
Right
really
on.
wish it had the value of oil. Like we often say, open data is the new oil. I wish it had the actual value in people's minds as oil, because it would be a lot easier to, yeah, we can tap into that and it'll work for us.
If there's a market price ticker for open data. There's a couple of questions left in the chat. Are you guys? We're a little bit over what we asked for commitment, but are you still good to hang out and answer questions?
Sure.
Yeah, cool. I should have asked you, Arunamia, what the correct pronunciation of your name is, but she has two questions. I don't know, Keith, can you see the chat there?
Yeah, I can.
It's so how to make sure the data is read in the same context of how it's been gathered. And then her second question is, does government share the data gathering technique and assumption while making the data open?
Those are really important questions, actually, from a premise standpoint. And it came up a lot when we were starting out with open data in Toronto. Context, right? There was a big fear that people will use the data out of context. And the best thing is, in part of your transparency mission, actually, is to indicate that in your publication of the data. So have an explanation as to this data was gathered, this was our premise. That helps too in terms of bias. And it's okay to be transparent about that. The fact is this data might have some biases associated to it, because you're hoping to get better data in the end. So if you get any feedback that way, it can be quite valuable. So the more you can provide on the portal page or the release page around those kind of issues is really important. And providing context is completely normal. Anybody we talk to in the developer community, user community, was never against that. They were against bad data going up with no explanation. They were against trying to fudge the truth a little bit, like, well, we have that data, but we'll release it in a couple of months and so on. It's much better to be honest and transparent about it. We're releasing this data. This is how we collect it. This is when we plan to refresh it. And again, you have to stick to that. That's building trust in government as well, which often open data is a road that you can go down that helps that kind of thing. So that actually is a real fundamental question. I'll give you a quick example of that. They started publishing, they called it a P card, I think. And I don't know what the P stood for, but it was a card that some managers were able to have that they could, if they had to like subscribe to something and it was really not that expensive and they couldn't do it through a purchase order. So they would use the credit card for it and other emergency expenses. And there was a fire in one of the downtown apartments. And on this person's P card, there was all kinds of money that had gone out to sleeping bags and this kind of thing. That wasn't itemized in how they released the data. And one of the local media got on that and said, well, how come this is like an expense in the thousands of dollars and so on? Had they provided the context in that release? This person was in charge of emergency issues. this is the fire, this is what they did, this is how much they spent. So it becomes a win instead of a negative because you're sharing that transparently. So I do think that's a key. So if you're a part of the team, part of the person presenting that data or even gathering the data, make sure you say to the people who are providing the data, let's provide a little more information on that because it's better to have the context.
Thank you, Keith.
Oh, you're welcome.
I've
Go ahead,
got
Gary.
a few additional thoughts. Let's think about government that for their operational requirements, whether it's policy development or planning for future projects or what have you, they collect data that they need for their purposes. And a lot of the data, some of the data then becomes open data, only if they feel comfortable doing so. And the one thing that is inconsistent that I've found when you take a look at open data is the metadata that's associated with it. So in some cases, it's very limited information, unlike kind of the Dublin core type of thing, or there's geospatial metadata. That information is inconsistent depending on which organization you're looking at, because metadata does take time and you need to maintain it. And that should be the place that tells you, how the data was collected, why it was collected, the accuracy, quality of the data. That would allow you to make a decision whether or not you want to use that data. But unfortunately, even though there are standards around metadata, it's inconsistent among organizations to what degree they use it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. So most of the time, what I found that when someone collects the data and someone else completely not related is using the data, there is like a communication gap that is a possibility, which is like explaining the context. Data by itself has no value unless we add the context, then it becomes an information. So thank you. And P card is a purchasing card, Keith, that companies gave to employees to make them purchase things with company money.
That makes sense. Interesting enough, by the way, when they started publishing that data, most of the managers stopped using their card. And that's interesting, right? Because in terms of data, it's good, I think. I'm biased, of course, but they weren't prepared to see their purchases show up. Yeah.
That's right. It's personal.
It's personal card. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And I think the last question we have is from Lene, possibly. How does this federated data project compare to something less structured like Maggie? Or, oh, she meant Kaggle.
Kaggle. There probably is a Maggie. That's when I mentioned Think DataWorks, it's similar in a sense. They're pulling data from all these disparate places and putting it on a page and trying to create a one-stop shop. So I would think the federated data would stick to government is my feeling. And Yuri, you can either second that or not, but they'd want to put the federal data, the provincial data, and ideally the city's data all in one place, where the cities and the provinces are pushing it up to probably the cloud, and then the federated site, probably maintained by the federal government, would then present all of that. Because that's really their business. I don't think they'd get into private, and that's where Think DataWorks is moving, and I think Kaggle is probably in the same boat. They're trying to just draw as much data as they can, which certainly has its place. But I think the value of federated data is it's sticking to their core business, which is the work of government and the data the government collects and the open data the government presents. Go to this place and you're going to be able to get it all. It's your one source. That, I think, is really the big dream.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, big dreams like that start with the federal government, my experience has limited success. The reality is that, in Canada, it's the two senior levels of government that conspire and collaborate and don't pay a hell of a lot of attention to local government. And that's just a recipe for disaster when we're talking about federated data. So I don't think they're going around about it the right way. I also don't think they've got the community engagement that they should have. You know, I mean, they're not even looking at, you know, federating data from nonprofit organizations or organizations like United Nations. So like our annual conference this year is focusing on, we're calling Open Earth, Every Decision Matters. And there is a case, and I think Keith had mentioned it earlier, when we look at environmental data, holy crap, it's like, it's a nightmare trying to find it. And years ago, you know, just to illustrate the point of federated data, not always that easy. In the US, they had something called the Open Data Clearinghouse. So what the Open Data Clearinghouse was supposed to be a federated site to all the data. So you punch in environmental data and then you get it from any place in the US. Well, actually what they did was they give you a list of the state clearinghouse websites, which then give you a list of local government websites. So you're doing the search for environmental data on each of these websites, which is totally counterproductive. So, you know, how far we get with the Canadian federated open data site, and the other question I raised, because I've been involved in a lot of global organizations, is, are you sure that doesn't already exist somewhere else? You know, reinventing the wheel. I'm afraid governments do that far too often.
Yuri has a tendency to sugarcoat things and not tell you how he really feels.
Yeah, geez, I can't really figure out what you're getting at there. One last
Gotta
question.
be honest about this.
Yeah, that's right. One last question, quick question from Kershid before we wrap up.
Well, unfortunately, it might not be a quick question, Kevin. So it's same as I think a build up on I might mispronounce the name Onima. When you were answering that question, is it the same as thick data? Like the contextual context is also provided, but it is embedded inside the data also.
It could be, yeah. And again, a lot of times though, it's the proficiency with the data. It may be, let's say a reporter's looking at it, and if they're not involving a data analyst exactly, they may make assumptions. So it's better, I think, to pull any information out of meta tags and so on around those kind of things in the preamble for the data. And that usually would get read because it's you know, you're on the portal, where's the data, and it's, you know, it's usually down in one spot. But yeah, you should try to provide it in both places. I mean, if it can be embedded, fine, and that could be geospatial, whatever, right? But yeah, you should really pull as much information around the context, bias, reason for collection, your use of it, and somebody else then may compare the data to see if they get the same results, but chances are they'll be mashing it up and doing other things with it. So there's certainly no harm in doing it. And the more that you can provide, the less trouble you're going to have or confusion with use of the data.
And also sometimes what I have seen with data, like with my little experience, is that sometimes when we gather the data, like when we are using that gathered data, we feel like that is 100%, but most of the time, probably there was some kind of stubbing, like that data is not for everyone. Like you didn't gather everyone's study and then created your report in your aggregated data. And when I'm saying everyone, that means like if Regina has 30,000 people, then each of these 30,000 people. So I believe like when we are creating percentages, or for the project that we initially discussed, what is the cost? would like to know the cost in all the shops that is active in Regina. And if we are taking some kind of snapshots of information, then we probably need to provide that so that when the report is being created, that has the right information, that it's been snapshotted on these date from these shops. These shops decided to participate or something like that. So just to be accurate in the information and to make sure that it is not being interpreted anywhere wrong. That's what I was coming into.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah, I
important.
think-
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to kind of accept as a reality check is that all data that you find is biased. It's biased based on the data collection methodology that you use. It's biased based on any filtering that you would put on it. It's biased based on potential algorithms that you're using to come up with from the raw to the resultant data that you're looking for. And anybody that's been through data gathering, will understand that you work on certain assumptions and those assumptions may not be right. And if we don't know what those assumptions were, then it's difficult to decide, what the validity of that data set actually is.
Absolutely, yeah. To understand the accuracy and precision, yeah, we need to understand the assumptions. Thank you very much.
So if anybody has any other follow-up questions, is the best place to get a hold of you on your website, or where can we follow up with you after tonight?
Our email, it's, have I got it right? Yeah, connect@go-opendata.ca. And we're also on Twitter, Go Open Data. It's an underscore, go_open data. And we are on LinkedIn, the LinkedIn/company. I think it's Go Open Data. Gee, why don't I just check that while you're winding things up?
Right on. Well, we'll post this presentation as well. I heard you loud and clear around getting you some YouTube subscribers. So we'll do that and blast this out to our community for anybody who couldn't make it tonight. And then we'll also share Twitter, LinkedIn, and your email address for anybody that wants to follow up. Also, if you guys would prefer, I can put you in our Slack channel and people can ask you questions through there.
Sounds good. It is Go-Open Data is the company group on LinkedIn.
Go-Open Data. Right on. Cool. Well, thanks again, Yuri and Keith, for being so generous with your time and knowledge and wisdom and experience. Tons of great learning, lots of great feedback from our small but mighty group tonight. So yeah, looking forward to connecting in the future. And it sounds like we have some follow-up discussions to have after tonight. So I look forward to following up with you folks.
Fantastic. Thank you as well.
Right on. Oh, looks like there's a registration link to the...
I just put... Yeah,
Yep.
well, I put it in because the next event that we have coming up on February the 15th is making data useful, data harmonization and interoperability. I thought that might be of interest to you folks.
Right on. We'll share it with our network for sure.
Okay.
Cool.
Great.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much and have a wonderful evening.
You betcha. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
You too, folks.
Good night.
Bye.